Okay, so we are going to go into our youth advocacy panel. We'll be talking about intergenerational climate circles. It's going to be a yapping session. And please, guys, ask us questions in the end. So I'm going to just introduce the panelists. So first up, we have Amber Turner. Amber Turner is a climate activist, environmental scientist, and a sustainability advocate from the Bahamas. She holds a Master of Science in Natural Resources and Environmental Management with a specialization in climate change from the University of the West Indies and a Bachelor of Science in Small Island Sustainability from the University of the Bahamas. Amber's passion for environmental advocacy was sparked during her undergraduate studies and has since evolved into a dynamic career at the intersection of science, policy, and community engagement. Her work emphasizes the critical roles of women and youth in addressing climate change and building climate resilience in small island developing states. As the founder of Miss Sustainability, Amber uses her platform to educate and mobilize young Bahamians around climate issues through engaging storytelling and grassroots outreach. She also co-founded Artistry in the Archipelago, an initiative that harnesses art and culture to promote environmental awareness and education. She was appointed a She Leads Here advocate by the Government of Canada, joining a global network of women championing I'm struggling, guys. Sustainable development. Amber Turner's unwavering commitment to climate justice, youth empowerment, and sustainable development continues to shape her mission, driving meaningful change for the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean region. Let's do a round of applause for Amber.
Our second panelist, LaShante Sampson. LaShante Sampson is a nonprofit leader, development practitioner, and youth advocate working at the intersection of policy, sustainability, and inclusive development. She currently serves as general manager of the Agricultural Development Organization of the Bahamas, where she leads programs focused on food security, school-based agriculture, and community resilience. Her work is rooted in empowering communities and creating systems that promote local sustainability and long-term social impact. A national youth ambassador to the Commonwealth and youth senator, LaShante has contributed to national, regional, and international dialogues on inclusive governance, social justice, and youth empowerment. She has represented Bahamian youth across platforms hosted by UNESCO, the Commonwealth Secretariat, the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, and the Caribbean Development Bank, using each platform to advocate for more inclusive and action-oriented policy engagement. Her work emphasizes the importance of intergenerational collaboration and policy fluency in addressing shared challenges and opportunities. LaShante is the founder of Bridge Bahamas, an education consultancy that connects Bahamian students with international scholarship and study abroad opportunities. Her writing and thought leadership has been published in the Nassau Guardian, featured in UNESCO publications, and recognized for her work on youth empowerment and sustainable development. Across all roles, LaShante brings a systems-based perspective linking policy, partnerships, and people to support meaningful change. She is especially passionate about ensuring that young people are positioned as critical agents of change and believes that real progress requires not only awareness, but coordinated cross-generational action. Let's welcome LaShante.
Now we're going to invite Samantha Ramirez Rubalcaba, one of my favorite girls. She's one of our SCG ambassadors. So Samantha Ramirez Rubalcaba has been serving as the first appointed Sustainable Development Goals Youth Ambassador for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas over the past year. In this position, Samantha's focus has been on educating Bahamian youth and providing them with a variety of opportunities to learn and contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. Since her graduation as valedictorian from Windsor High School in 2021, Samantha has been heavily involved in the green and blue economy, having received numerous certifications from the Ministry of the Environment, University of Cambridge, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, and other internationally recognized organizations. She has also worked several internships in the civil and structural mechanical, and electrical engineering industries with the objective of understanding the gap between existing engineering practices and the sustainable alternatives needed to help the Bahamas continue to develop. Samantha is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in engineering in environmental technology at La Universidad Anahuac in Mexico City, with a focus on the SDGs relating to 1, life below water, 2, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and 3, responsible consumption and production. Samantha plans to focus her professional career on creating engineering practices that prioritize both economic growth and environmental protection. So let's welcome Ambassador Sam to the stage. And lastly, who will be joining us on the stage is Luke James Trim. I introduced him earlier after that amazing keynote.
Y'all ready? Y'all heard that? No? Okay, we're going to get started with this panel, the YAP session, which is really going to be more of a conversation with the panelists up here as well as you, our audience, because it's kind of organized as an intergenerational climate circle, which means getting perspectives from everyone in the room. And so we're going to get started with the first prompt. What should intergenerational climate action look like in the Bahamas, in the wider Caribbean, in our world today? Feel free, anyone, to jump in.
I mean, I don't mind starting.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay. I got you. So intergenerational climate action, what it should look like, or what it refers to, is having older generations working with younger generations together to create sustainable solutions. And we had the SDG conference yesterday, so I'm going to be tying everything really back into the Sustainable Development Goals, which one of them is SDG 13, which is climate action. But what we want to be doing is, we know that there's people that have 20, 30, 40 years of experience in their respective industries and career paths, right? Those are experts. They have a lot of knowledge in whatever industry. They know how things are done efficiently, effectively, cost-effectively as well. But we also have new generations that are coming in, and they see problems that are happening in our existing industries. And so they come up with new ideas, with new solutions, with greener solutions, especially because we're so vulnerable as a small island developing state. And we have a lot of worries about what our future is going to look like if we don't help mitigate climate action, right? And so all of this sounds a little bit arbitrary, but to give an example of what it could look like with intergenerational climate action is, we have the construction industry. In the construction industry, we have a lot of materials. Say we're trying to build a house, we need wood, we need steel, we need cement, for example. All of these things, a lot of professionals already have their preferred vendors, their preferred suppliers, and they have those things because they have discounts or deals or just reliability. But they need to understand that when new generations are coming in, there's a lot of youth that are coming up with new materials that are alternates, that are greener, that are better, that are more sustainable, more sustainably sourced. So getting that intergenerational climate action working together would look like having those older professions being open-minded to these new solutions, and these new people coming in with new perspectives being open-minded and understanding that it can't just be all green, that we have to integrate it into what's existing because what's existing already works. And yeah, that would be my answer.
Thank you so much, Sam. Amber's going to take it from here.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on what Sam said, when I think about intergenerational climate action, I think about knowledge sharing. You know, climate change disproportionately affects the youngest in the communities as well as the oldest. And that big age gap, there's a lack of knowledge sharing. So whether that's traditional ecological knowledge, whether that's scientific knowledge from the younger generation that the older generation might not be aware of. So just creating spaces that we can have knowledge sharing in a respectable space where we can have dialogue to make sure that everyone understands, everyone is on the same page, everyone is getting the information, whether it's new, whether it's old, just making sure that we all can work together as we progress towards a better Bahamas as it relates to climate action.
Okay, I'll add. For me, what does intergenerational climate action look like? In addition to what both of them said, I think that there's an opportunity as well for some type of structured collaboration. So we look at countries like Australia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, where they have like actual, not just like national youth councils, but national youth climate councils. Or we see that a lot of intergovernmental organizations are having policy spaces where they are intergenerational for people to discuss what can we do to move forward in climate action. And so just kind of structuring out those opportunities, whether that's through formalizing a council for it, whether that's mentorship opportunities. And as Amber said, it allows for knowledge transfer, and it also makes sure that policy is inclusive. In addition to climate change directly as well, I think that there are structured opportunities for youth to be appointed to committees focused on other areas that affect climate change, like agriculture, for example, coastal protection, or anything of that nature. And so just structuring out those opportunities to ensure that that knowledge goes both ways, whereas the adults can contribute their lived experiences, youth can contribute their long-term insight or any innovative practices that they think are appropriate for the time. And so yeah, just institutionalizing those youth and adult partnerships.
To wrap things up, I think speaking a bit about media and optics, what we would like to see, and I mean this both literally and figuratively, is that mutual respect between the youth and those who are young at heart. I think people underestimate the power of when young people and older folks come together. Think, for example, you're scrolling on TikTok and you see a video with a seasoned older farmer, and he's there telling us about traditional farming techniques. And then entering that frame is a young agrotech who is now modernizing those techniques. And that is what we want to see, that mutual respect between young people and the older folks, because when young people and those who have the knowledge to make us better come together, that is when we are seeing change, that is when we are seeing impact, and most importantly, I think that is what true intergenerational climate action will look like, literally and figuratively.
Well said. Thank you so much. The audience seems to love it. And speaking of the audience, we come into y'all next. Just quickly, before we move on, we want to hear from anyone in the audience who either has questions at this point or wants to share comments on that question. What should intergenerational climate action look like, or what's your own personal experience has been? We've heard about mutual respect. We've heard about inclusion in policy processes and things like that. What are some insights that you may have in the audience? There should be some mics still floating around if anyone has anything they want to add. I see a question in the front. Hard-headed bird don't make good soup. That's an excellent question. I'll let the panelists lead with that. But if y'all didn't hear the question, what will we do as people in these roles, and how we encourage people in more senior roles than ourselves to innovate beyond where youth and their ideas and innovations clash with those of the older generation or with the older process that's already existing?
And before the panelists start, this is actually a great question, actually tying in with our second question, that is, what are the greatest barriers to communicating climate change realities to Bahamian citizens? So I think it ties in perfectly with what she just asked. So what do you think, panelists, is the greatest barriers to communicating climate change realities to Bahamian citizens?
Well, since I'm in communications, I'll go first. Just to answer your question first, and then I'll wrap in my response. Clashing is part of human nature. I think in any sort of meeting or any sort of advocacy, when two different ideas, especially from two different eras, come together to try to meet that junction, there is going to be some sort of tension. I think what it comes down to is how you articulate your vision and ensuring that both parties find that common ground to ensure that whatever goal you all are working towards, you all can achieve that. Tying into some of the barriers that Bahamians may face, and this is regionally, I think it comes down to, one, the lack of science-based evidence that's being articulated in the public, two, the lack of lived realities, and three, and most important, I think a lot of you all can relate to that, is the over-reliance on technical language or vernacular. I think you all may see professionals in climate change, they may come up and start using some terms that you all may not be really familiar with. And when they keep going on and on and on, in their mind, they're killing it. They're eating that roll up. And you're sitting there like, what is going on? What are these people saying? So I think one of the greatest barriers is ensuring that when people are speaking about climate change and climate action, that the information they are articulating is digestible. It's the type of information that when you could tell your friends, you could go home and tell your parents, Mom, this is what I learned, that is what I learned. But when they go up and speaking about all these scientific methods, all the SIDS and all, I remember the first time I heard the word SIDS, and I thought it was a disease. I was very young. I was like, SIDS? Okay. I was like, why are we speaking about SIDS in a climate change forum? And then, I got older and I realized that SIDS stands for Small Island Developing States. And it made me think about what other young person who probably heard a term that they weren't familiar with and sat there in a forum just lost and confused. So from a communication perspective, I think one of the greatest barriers is how we articulate that information where climate change is concerned.
Thank you, Luke. I think I want to quickly build on that as well. Luke, you mentioned earlier in your previous response mutual respect, and I think I want to add to that as well, mutual understanding, and the fact that these conversations, or any conversation, really goes both ways. So if you do find yourself being that person in the room who is confused, I sure you'll learn in school, no question is a stupid question. That is extremely true. As you move higher and higher up, you will get into feeling like you have some kind of imposter syndrome or you don't belong in the room. That is never true, and all you have to do is ask, and if they don't have the answer, or if they don't want to answer, ask again and ask again. Get as annoying as you need to be so that you can get the information that you need, so that you can help the people that you are responsible for, that you care about, and continue the work that you're interested in doing. So I just wanted to add that in. Any other panelists want to speak to that?
Just to hone in on the aspect of science communication, as a scientist myself, I understand that scientists typically work in silos, and there's a lot of technical language and technical verbiage that a lot of times goes over individuals' head. And I think one way that we can break that barrier is through the use of art. As a science communicator, art transcends age, gender, language, and it's such a beautiful way to be able to communicate a complex topic into ways that people can understand. And for example, if you see a picture of a dying coral reef, you feel more a sense of urgency, a sense of care when you see that image, rather than someone telling you, well, the corals are dying because of ocean acidification, the sea surface temperatures are too high, and you feel more care when you can see the picture, and it makes you feel more. And so just using art as an avenue for science communication is one way that we can break that barrier. And I think to answer your question, a lot of us up here, we go into rooms where we're either the youngest or our voices don't have a lot of leverage. But what we do is we keep showing up. Or the only Bahamian, the only woman, we keep showing up. And the good thing about that is, yes, it's hard, and yes, you get despaired sometimes, but you have a cause that you want to fight for, and you have something that you're passionate about, and the more you keep showing up, the more that they keep listening, the more that they make the space at the table for you to be heard, because they see the passion, they see that you care. And so my answer to your question would be to keep showing up, whatever that looks like.
Okay. And so just to piggyback off of what both Luke and Amber said, first I'll answer your question. In addition to showing up, I think as young people, one of the things that I have found to work for me is knowing your stuff. So when you go into the room with your scientific data, your facts, or any of these things, your study, your learned, then they can't deny what it is that you are saying. And so that is a way for people to listen to you when you know your stuff. If you are going into the rooms and you're just scrambling around for answers, we are already working, well, our age is already working against us. And so they be like, these young people don't know what they're saying. But if you come and you show up and you know what it is that you're talking about, people will be more inclined to listen to you, I think. And for the second part of the question, I definitely do agree. For me, I think that the framing of the language is sometimes a challenge. I always go to Amber, like, Amber, can you explain this to me as I'm preparing to go into any space? And so, yes, so people often see climate change as something that is global or something that is technical, and there is always a disconnect in bringing that back to our lived reality. Here in the Bahamas, we just talked about it in the working session. We went through Hurricane Dorian, and while for many people that was an opportunity to take hurricane serious, many people didn't realize that, or even consider that the aggressiveness of that storm was a result of something that is bigger. And so I think, one, that language has to be more accessible, and it has to bring it back to our reality. How does climate change impact food prices, for example? When the supply chain is disrupted because of whatever natural disaster is happening, that affects inflation or food supply. How does climate change affect housing insecurity, right? If the houses are damaged and people need places to live, we look at that. How does that affect our preparation for disaster recovery? And so just bringing it back to our lived realities, and also, trying to engage community leaders as well in order to speak that language. Again, in the working lunch, somebody was telling me, this is the first time we've heard about the SDGs at this conference. And so that tells me that there's an opportunity at the community level for teachers, for example, in the classroom, to introduce these concepts so it doesn't seem so technical or so far out of reach. There's an opportunity for pastors to talk about, what the realities of, or any trusted leader in the community, to bring that down to the community level in order for you to be able to relate and to understand that language and see, what you can do, how you can be a part of the solution. And obviously, you might not be a climate scientist, but you know that if you reduce, reuse, recycle, or if you cut down on this, that, and the next, you can participate in that effort to reduce the effects of climate change, however small that might be.
Thank you, Lashante. Before we move to you, there was a question. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to respond. Probably being one of the few people in here that have a yellow tag on the NIB card, which says senior. I can try to bring it from this side of the point of view. A lot of times, and I'm not necessarily typical because I've always been in the environmental area, and so I know the challenges and what we're up against. But a lot of elderly or older people who I hang with or I associate with, there's this feeling of being lectured to, and the feeling of somehow our actions, which are correct, but nobody wants to be told that what they did is causing what is happening today, okay? And so there's that resistance to your message because it's almost accusatory. And so you have to find out a better approach of how your message comes to persons of the older generation. Because if you tell them, well, gas guzzling cars and, all of these other things are what caused the problem, even though you're correct, there's some guilt, and then when there's guilt, there's, closing of communication. And so I would say the way you approach that older generation is going to be crucial. And also relating it to their day-to-day lives. If you're talking about retirees or persons, I love your example of the contractor, all right? The thing is, that contractor has been doing that so long that that's all he knows and that's what he's comfortable with. So what you have to find a way of doing is his supplier is the one you need to get in touch with. The suppliers of his, if all that is available or if an alternative is there that's available to him that is eco-friendly and cost-effective, then he's going to be more open-minded to it.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I think I completely agree with everything that everybody said. Clashes are inevitable, and I do think that no matter what you do, you have to approach it with respect, because again, nobody responds well to criticism, whether it's constructive or not. Somebody's telling you that you're doing something wrong or not at the peak, maximum priority, best way to do it possible. So you have to approach it with respect and understand that even though there is that potentially negative response that you're going to get, you have a bunch of ideas and you can't tone those down just to please somebody else. Again, do it with respect, but you're going to have so many ideas. Just keep coming up with them. Just keep mentioning them. Be prepared. get all the research that you need in order to be able to be prepared when you're presenting those solutions to whoever it is, whether it's your superior, your boss, or just an older generation folk that's just working in the industry. Be prepared. Be prepared for a lot of no's. Be prepared to be told that that's not how we do it, that we can't change it. And then just come and just ask why. Tell them why, because sometimes it's just their automatic response to say no because that's how we do it. And so you just want to say why. Challenge them to understand, why can't we make that change? Why shouldn't we make that change? And if they don't have a response to that, that's where you kind of break in through their shell and how you can start making those changes individually and independently. Where you can say, well, I've done some research. If you don't have a reason for why we can't do that, I've done some research. This is what I think we can do. This is better because of this. This is going to benefit us in this way. There's no adverse effects, or the adverse effects are minimal compared to the benefits. This is what we can do, and this is how we can apply that change. So yes, clashes are inevitable, but just keep going in with your yeses, with your ideas, and all of that. And to respond to Waynisha's question of why we should care, or sorry, what was the question?
What are the greatest barriers to communicating climate change realities to Bahamian citizens?
One big barrier is getting people to actually care. And we spoke about this in the SCG conference yesterday. A lot of people tend to think that you have to be in the sustainability space to care about, or in the environmental space to be caring about sustainability, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, if we don't implement sustainability and if we don't help out with climate action, there's already so many effects that we're seeing. Any change in weather patterns or temperature, whether those heat waves, sea level rise, hurricanes, they're causing so much havoc in our country and in small island developing states. We're seeing a lot of infrastructure loss, we're seeing coastal erosion, we're seeing so many bad effects on public safety, public health. So it's not just those people that are in the sustainable space or in the environmental space who are getting affected. And that's what we need to kind of get to people. They may understand that, they may be aware of that, but they don't necessarily care because they think, oh, we could leave that over to the marine biologists and the environmental engineers. And so we each need to be able to find a passion and then be able to apply sustainability into that passion, because without sustainability, there's no longevity. We're not going to have a future secured. So just making sure that we tie that back in as well.
I agree. I agree with you completely, Sam, and you guys actually tied in the third question, but I'll touch on what Siobhan, Sam, and Amber touched on in regards of imposter syndrome, using art and storytelling, and then mutual respect. When I entered, my degree is in law and criminal justice. I always tell people when I entered this space, I had no idea on what exactly was climate change. I always say that I'm not a climate scientist. My good friend Amber is. And I say that I don't have a PhD, I don't have a master's degree, but my country has a story. You know, I always, every room I go in, I talk about it. Yes, the Bahamas is known for our beautiful beaches, crystal clear waters. We're known for great weather. But, you know, the world saw when we took that big hit, when Hurricane Dorian hit our country in 2019. And you see how I'm drawing you in? I use storytelling. I use telling my personal story on why I'm passionate about my country and why climate change and sustainability matters. So I always think, like, in communications with the older generation, because when you go into these global spaces, it's so rare that youth are involved. And if youth are in this space, it's because, like, they're trying to meet a quota. So they're like, okay, we need to have like 10 young people, 4 from small island development states, 3 from the Pacific. You know, are we gonna look bad? But they're not going to look represent. I'm telling you guys, I've been traveling globally for the past year and a half, and it's like, okay, we got to make sure the Bahamas talk. We got to make sure Tuvalu talks, like, you know. But when I do get that opportunity, because they want to put us to the forefront, I tell my story. So I've met so many young people today that's passionate about sustainability, are passionate about climate change, and I want you to know that you don't have to know it all. You can be educated. Like when I go to pursue my master's, I want to do my master's in climate change, but always tell your story. Always know that what's driving this passion. Why do you want to see this change? Sam is a great person when it comes to like engineering and all the good stuff that she's been talking about. Amber is really great when it comes to research. Siobhan is amazing. Like everybody on the panel is like persons you should connect with, and connectivity is also very important. Use your connections. Young people, get on LinkedIn. Like, don't worry about what the older generation is saying. They matter because they carry wisdom, but we are the persons that have to deal with the repercussions of what our country and the world is going to look like if we don't use our voices, show up, and actually try to contribute to climate action. So,
Thank you so much, Venetia. I also want to touch on a few points. I think Amber raised a really brilliant point about art, and I want to expand on that a little bit on thinking for any artist that may be in the room or anyone who may want to be an artist. You're already an artist if you already want to be an artist, but thinking about what art looks like and what that communication can look like for you personally. Wenisha's talked about storytelling and telling your personal story. You may have a different mode of doing that, but taking up that space and using your talent to communicate climate change problems, to communicate climate action, to bring other people together, to find people who are doing the same thing or also in the art space, to share those stories, to share those facts and important insights about what this problem means for the Bahamas is crucially important. I think also the idea that Lashante shared about knowing your stuff and going into those spaces prepared. I think in addition to that, not always feeling like those spaces are the spaces that you need to be in to tell this story or to advocate for climate change and climate action. I think that finding other alternative spaces or creating your own spaces by connecting, as Wenisha was saying, connecting with people that you see doing this work and working with them to introduce those spaces in ways and in places where you don't see them. So if you're going back to your island and you know that there's not a lot of spaces there where people talk about climate change or where climate action is going on, then you should be the one to step up, you, your friends, your family. I think there needs to be more conversations about this to kind of release the stigma, to spread more awareness, and to break down those barriers that were mentioned between different generations and between different groups about this issue. So the more talking that we do, the more action we'll be able to do. And I see a question. You have the mic. Go ahead.
Hello? Okay, so I have a question. How can individuals interested in climate action and sustainability get more involved in the field? For example, like you all have different fields and different paths, but what are some opportunities for youth in the Bahamas? Like, I know y'all are youth ambassadors, but you know that deadline has ended for the upcoming one. So what are some other things, some other opportunities?
Okay, so just wanted to say that there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and I feel like these goals are cross-cutting and they are very comprehensive, and so maybe if it's not climate action, there are other goals that I think that can relate to any career path that you are in. Luke shared with me that when he was speaking at his table today, people were saying, I want to be in finance. And then you say, oh, there's an opportunity for climate finance. Oh, I'm interested in being a professional basketball player. Oh, climate change affects health in a certain way. And so these are some considerations that you have to make. And so you don't have to be in a specific career path in order to care or do work or advocacy in sustainability. And I'll pass it over to Amber to talk about the climate space specifically.
Yeah, so like Lashante said, these goals are intersectional. And like we spoke about at the working lunch, there are so much ways that you can tie in sustainability and climate action in your everyday lives. Good health and well-being, if you want to be a doctor. There's also environmental law. If you want to focus on economics, there's a way to do that, whether it's through resource economics or climate finance. So there's so much ways to tie in the SDGs, whether that's in the broader scheme of sustainability or environmentalism and climate action. And some ways you can get involved, just to plug. The Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, they have a cadre of 14 youth ambassadors. Lashante is the youth ambassador to the Commonwealth, and I have the opportunity to serve as the youth ambassador to the United Nations. And yes, the program, the deadline may be closed as it relates to the climate change ambassadors, but our deadline is soon going to open. And we have the opportunity to advocate and to be in the rooms and to be able to network and partner with various organizations to make sure that youth are at the forefront. And so maybe that's an opportunity that you would be interested in, or anybody in the room, that may be an opportunity. Oh yes, we are also having a National Youth Forum this evening at the Nassau Village Community Center from 6:30 to 9 p.m., where we will be discussing climate change and disaster risk management. So if that's something you'd also be interested in, you guys can meet us there. But as relates to organizations in the Bahamas, there's a plethora. You have BRIEF, you have BNT. I know the Organization of Responsible Governance does a lot of work. And then there's just a plethora of organizations. So just to tie in Renisha's point of networking, when you come into these spaces, talk to individuals that are in the rooms doing the work and to see how you can get involved. It may not be broadcasted sometimes, so just make sure you have a conversation to see how you can fit in whatever that may look like for you.
Thank you, Amber. I think I'll add quickly on that. Clap it up, please. You have extremely brilliant panelists here with us today, so please make sure to make them feel good so they come back and keep helping us out with spreading this message. I wanted to add on to that in terms of getting connected or getting involved in those spaces. You'll find that once you get into the space, there's so many, it just spirals and dominoes and everything. So it's really on you to take that first step and get locked into a dedicated community that's organized around this work, whether it's a local organization, whether it's through collaborations with people in positions like ours as the youth ambassadors, or whether it's through some learning platform that you find online, some environmental page you follow on Instagram or TikTok. Get involved into a dedicated community and then just pay attention. Pay attention to the opportunities that arise and continue to follow up on those and pursue those as you learn more and engage more with the action. Sam, you go ahead.
Yeah, if I can add on, yes, there's a lot of internships and youth ambassadorships and career opportunities that you can go on to. There's a bunch, and there's our 17 SDGs, so no matter where you go, you can find a place and try advocate for climate action. But getting involved doesn't just have to be participating in things that you can put on your resume. Getting involved in your personal life is a really big thing too. Just making sustainable choices consciously in your personal life. So whether it's supporting local businesses, not going to Shein, Temu, Amazon, all of those, and also supporting local farming as well, local agriculture, supporting those smaller things, making smarter decisions about what you're consuming, about your water consumption, your energy consumption, your product consumption, making more sustainable, conscious decisions to cut down on those productions or those on your overall consuming of all of these products is a really, really great way to get involved as well. And it's not just you, because you're going to be affecting those in your households, your mom, your dad may talk to other friends, so they'll start doing it too. You could tell your church community, you could tell your school, literally anybody else, your friends, and that way you can start kind of a domino or chain reaction and help other people do those small actions that lead to big changes. So think about your personal life to get involved too.
And don't be deterred. As Sam mentioned earlier, you will get a lot of no's coming your way. You may also get some weird looks and people making comments about you turning into some vegan, something. But stay the path and continue to encourage others to move forward in the right direction.
Just wanted to add one more point. Not everybody will have the opportunity to lead, but that doesn't mean that whatever participation or contribution that you make is not valuable, because we're all working towards a shared goal. So don't be discouraged if you don't have a leadership position in something. And then sometimes we need to learn before we lead. And so just by getting involved, those are training grounds and learning grounds for you to eventually lead.
And I'll add lastly, before we go into the next question, I always tell young people as well to think global. When I started off in activism and using my voice and joining spaces like Youth in Parliament and stuff like that, I always was Nassau-centric, right? And then a few years later, I just learned that, hey, I could take my Bahamian flag, I could take being a Bahamian to the world. And like I said, there's so much global opportunities online, literally in sustainability, especially right now in climate change. Use it, apply. The UNFCCC, they have numerous free certified courses that young people can take to educate themselves on climate change as well. So I always say, get planted and rooted at home, but just know that there is opportunities all around the world that young Bahamians like yourself can apply to.
We have a really great audience in here today. Y'all are very active and engaged. And so this next question, I think I want to turn over to y'all first, maybe, if anyone from the audience wants to share their perspectives. And the question is, how would you ensure diverse perspectives are included in national efforts to combat climate change? So how will you make sure that the climate action happening on a national level is inclusive, is intergenerational, everybody's talking to each other, and we're making progress in that way? Anyone from the audience wants to chime in there? Over here on the right, is there a mic? No. Oh, it's coming, it's coming.
DeLon Evans, High School Youth Ambassador. For me, when we talk about bringing about that kind of change for everyone in the Bahamas, be it young people, older people, I'll use a personal experience, for example. I came from Aquinas College. I'm a graduate of Aquinas College. Go Aces. But during the past 6 years, over the past 6 years, we've worked on a project that was implemented by Brief, the Eco Flag or Green Schools Initiative. And through that initiative, we brought together community partners. So people from Bristol, from Bahamas Waste. We went into the community in Jubilee Gardens, and we pulled neighbors to come to community cleanups. We did beach cleanups. We empowered our young people to be ready to take on the challenge. And in doing so, we not only gained our green flag, but we gained a sense of initiative, a sense of purpose, and a shared idea of what it means to be citizens of this one planet, because we don't function in isolation. And through this initiative, through our recycling programs, through partnering with community partners, we allowed students to have an understanding and a better idea of what it really means to feel a part of this connected journey. And I believe that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So when we talk about climate change and growing together as one, you have different aspects of it all. So let's look at spirituality. I mean, going off topic a bit, but staying on topic. When you talk about bringing climate change to Bahamians, we're very spiritual people, and we believe in God's power for our lives and for our country. So talk to Bahamians about how God gave us this planet to take care of, and bring that perspective to them instead of saying, well, 1.5 to stay alive. What does that mean for me? I don't understand that. But when we talk about how this is our gift, and this is our opportunity to do the work of God and His will for nature and mankind to continue to develop and spread His word, that is a way in which we can assist one another to understand something that may seem foreign to us. So I hope I understood the question and brought about an answer that was effective enough.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. A powerful response. Up here in the front again.
Well, I hope y'all don't mind if I sit down for this. Well, y'all sitting down, so I can sit down too. But in order to include everyone, I feel like when you think of the Bahamas, many people think of just Nassau, but it isn't. It's Abaco, it's not New Providence. It's Grand Bahama, it's Rum Key, Ragged Island, Maguana, it's everybody. And honestly, tourism plays a big part in our economy. And instead of just including just Bahamians, let's include everyone. For example, to be sustainable, when you go away, you see these recycling bins. Especially in the States, you see plastic, glass, aluminum. But I don't see it over here. I don't see it in Freeport. I don't see it in Abaco. I don't even see it in Nassau. And that's what I find quite mind-blowing, that you don't see these sustainable practices that others are accustomed to over here. And I'm pretty sure there are millions of people who visit. Speaking of the cruise port, I don't see that type of practice within the downtown area of Bay Street. And I think intergenerational isn't just us, it's everybody. I'm including race, I'm including people with disabilities, I'm including people who are just happy to be alive. People who are alive in general. Humanity, basically, and society. And so I would incorporate that into just life on the whole to include everybody, including race, people who visit for a short time, and not just make the Bahamas about Nassau, but to make it about every other island and stuff. So yeah.
Thank you. There's a much needed shift of focus to wider inclusion in all of our climate action and our general governance for the Bahamas. So we are looking forward to see what kind of initiatives come from those of us that are already here, but also those of you that will be joining us in these positions, and also just in your current position as youth of the Bahamas, how do you make a change? If there are no more questions from the up, there's one in the back.
I just wanted to bring up the topic of ecofeminism, because something we can do in the Bahamas is bring in things like diva cups and making them more accessible, because a lot of things that we use now for like feminine hygiene would be like pads and tampons, and that's not, since we aren't like really recycling, we could be using things that are reusable where you just have to like boil it like a diva cup instead. So yeah, like that, and just intersectional feminism, so helping us, I don't know, just get better with sustainability. So, but I don't really know how we would bring that in.
Could you maybe put the mic just a bit closer so we can hear you? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I was just talking about ecofeminism and like bringing in things like diva cups and making feminine hygiene more, well, it makes feminine hygiene less expensive, which is really important, I think, because like pink tax. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There's.
Oh, and Abaco, we have 2. Yes.
Because I'm just curious because, like, I really don't, I mean, I'm in one of the high schools in Grand Bahama, but I don't hear a lot of, like, you know, promotion for persons to apply in those family islands. I don't know what other family islands, if they hear information. So, you know, again, branching out from, yeah, this is where the majority of the population lives. We get it. But it is an archipelago of 700 islands, keys, and rocks, and whatever. And so I think we need to be more inclusive in a lot of the positions that at least advertised or promoted or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll touch on that briefly. So I definitely agree that representation is super, super important, not just for Nassau, but all of the islands across, you know, our archipelago. I know for sure because next year we're also going to have climate change youth ambassadors, along with, I think later this year, the SCG ambassadors. We're open to the entire Bahamas. So please, please, please apply. Follow us on social media. We'll give you guys the handles later. So we're definitely not just exclusive to only Nassau. We want everyone to be included, all youth included. So, yes.
Big up to Grand Bahama.
So I would encourage you, the panelists and the persons who are coming behind you, because you're all young adults, okay? And you're soon to become old adults because they're firing you soon, all right? Just joking. But to become role models for the ones you see in front of you, but by expanding that by visiting the family islands and going into the high schools. You know, it would be beautiful to see you come to Jack Hayward Senior High and on an assembly just speak to our young people about, you know, how they could become empowered and be part of the solution, not the problem.
Thank you. On that note, I'm going to segue. After this panel, I can get your contact so I do come, because over the next year, that's exactly the kind of work I'll be doing. So we'll connect after this. Ashante, I saw you had a hand. I know you have something to say.
Our former climate change youth ambassador.
Thank you so much. So, in listening, a lot of what I was thinking was covered, thankfully, but I do agree with the sentiments as to what was said with the space, well, not necessarily the space, but the opportunity sometimes sitting in a silo, for lack of a better word. It is sometimes centralized to Nassau, and I think it's also how we tend to market the information as well, because in going to the Family Islands and having the conversations one-on-one, you see a difference as opposed to when you bring everybody to the capital. Them being in their environments, in their communities, learning, and then we're going into the spaces, and it's an information exchange, because there's a lot that I don't know about their communities and their environments, and there's a lot that they don't necessarily understand that's being disseminated in Nassau. So there is a bridge that we need to fix, that we have a gap within country. And the further down the country you go, unfortunately, the larger that gap gets. So I guess it does beg the question at this point, what more can we do to get into these communities so that we reduce the marginalization that actually exists within the Bahamas? Because whether we like to admit it or not, unfortunately, from an outside perspective, and outside being the Family Islands, it does seem more far-reach when you're in forums like this, because it seems more like a Nassau conversation rather than a Bahamian conversation, because so many of the opportunities do not reach the foot of the country. And it makes one seem, if you speak to someone from Iguana, for example, is this something for me to apply for if I'm, one, not necessarily in the conversation, two, I don't necessarily have access to the information, or three, I hear about the opportunity 3 weeks after the northern part of the country. So that'll be the only thing that I really hope going forward we do more to get better. We do more to fix it and get it right.
Thank you so much, Ashante. We're going to move, we're short on time, I think. We're going to move to another question.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everyone. So just chiming in onto the topic, a lot of great discussion is happening. So one, I did want to highlight the ecofeminism mention that was brought up. That is a very key and important aspect that I know we might be having a little disconnect on in terms of how we can move towards progression on that kind of topic as a culture and a country. There are products in country that are more organic, for instance, that do support that level. Women's Haven, for instance, is one, so just highlight to that. But on the mention of decentralization, that's the key word I love to bring up today. We, with the youth program, we have tried our best to do a level of communication to ensure that the national scope, the regional aspect of the northern and the southern Bahamas has seen stuff. But I would say in terms of marketing, for instance, you know, there's a disconnect when it comes to technology. And that's one thing that we are aware of, and we try year to year to try and, you know, just improve that. But it's still something that we're working on. It's definitely a challenge. However, with the conference, for instance, that's why we have it literally seated in the summer when school is closed, so we can ensure that we have persons from different family islands, excuse me, so that we can have persons from different family islands be able to attend and be part of the conversation. Now, of course, that's, you know, an annual event, so that's not, as Ashante had mentioned, too frequent, and that's something we need to close the gap on. But it is something that we're trying to be more intentional on, not just my unit who's hosting these youth programs in the climate space, but it's something I think across other governments and other agencies we're working on. It's definitely important. Amber, I thought you were going to say something.
Oh, when you're done.
Yeah, but that's all I wanted to add to the conversation, and I'm glad that you guys are here opening the message on this for sure. Even having different persons from other countries in the region here to join the conversation, if we have a way to pivot and ensure that the engagement continues in a more frequent kind of atmosphere, is definitely something of interest. but again, the disconnect because of technology. And now when I say the disconnect of technology, you also have to think of the funding. Getting us into the space of connecting to all of the family islands is also a challenge where we're still trying to be more intentional so that we can make sure we have visits and be face-to-face at certain levels. But when we're not able to do that, how can we ensure that persons are still able to access technology, whether different islands have like a community-based infrastructure so persons can come together and be part of mechanisms. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. I know there was a question over on the right. Thank you so much, Melissa. That was an excellent point to raise. If there's still a question on this side.
Okay, so I have a question. I know we are facing climate change, not just locally, but globally. My question is, what is the biggest climate change threat to our country or chain of islands?
The biggest climate change threat to our country.
Yes. Not just this, well, I know you all spoke of the rise in the sea levels, the coral reefs, the heat. I mean, if that's just the most part of it.
Right. I think I can start by saying that when we look at climate change threats to the Bahamas, there's several different areas. And so when it comes to thinking about what's the biggest threat, like that can have a lot of different framings. So maybe the most existential threat to our entire archipelago is sea level rise, but each of these threats have different time limits. And so in terms of sea level rise, that one has a longer time limit than, say, the health experience of extreme heat or hurricanes that are more dramatic and have greater impact in the short term as we experience them pretty much year to year. And so when we think about the threats to the Bahamian archipelago from climate change, we think about it in these different sections. And so as we mentioned in our first panel about health, like that is a key national priority now because we're seeing those effects and we're seeing how Bahamian people as well as the natural environment that is encompassed in our islands is being impacted by the climate change problem, and it's affecting the health of all of those things collectively. Anyone else want to chime in?
I think I'll add something from a regional perspective, and it's not just central to the Bahamas. I think the biggest threat that we face in the Caribbean is that most of our individuals and citizens don't even realize that this climate issue is a threat because everyone thinks it's either something that they don't have to chime in on, something that doesn't interest them. I remember when Beryl passed through, I was seeing more memes and credible information on social media, and this is what we are facing here in the region where people think that this issue of climate change is something that they cannot solve, is something that is not personal to them, and that is the biggest threat in the region and globally, is that people are not seeing how serious this issue of climate change is. Now, I remember back in Tobago when we got the alert that Beryl was passing through, nobody was moving, nobody cared, nobody could care if Monday fell on Friday. And what we did as a media house is that we had to do like a throwback and had to remind these people what the island looked like when Hurricane Flora passed. And when they were seeing those dilapidated houses, lives were lost, that is when we started seeing people getting more involved. So it goes back to what I said earlier. A lot of people don't understand that there is a threat, and I think, besides the rising sea level and the erosion of the shorelines, that lack of understanding and that lack of information is the biggest threat that we are facing.
I think I'll also just tie in quick that in addition to the issue with these different climate change threats is that they're all interconnected. And when you think about the sea level rise, for instance, or the hurricanes, especially in the context of small and developing states, like the Bahamas, other Caribbean countries, the challenge there is that these are all interlinked and they are all directly tied to our survival as a people because we only have our little tiny bits of land in the sea around us. And so if something's affecting the seas around us, it's affecting the land that we live on, and it's affecting us as a people. And so when you think about it, everything is really linked. You don't have a climate change health problem without a challenge with hurricanes because we have extreme emergency health challenges when we have hurricanes or in the aftermath of hurricanes. We have extreme health challenges with the heat waves and the increasing challenges with the high temperatures that we're experiencing. because in addition to it affecting people, it's affecting the natural environment, and then that's then tied back to how it affects people. So our crops may be being affected, our native species, as we talked about, will be being affected, and so these are all threaded together, and that's what is a part of that, the climate change itself being such a huge threat to our survival as a people.
Okay, a round of applause for Javon. So just to wrap up the panel, because it's been amazing thus far, I would just ask everyone in just one sentence, just one thing that you think that we can do to secure the future in regards to climate change. One thing that we can do.
And as our panelists are thinking about the question, we do have someone in the back who has a mic and wants to chime in. You can go ahead.
All right, appreciate that. I'm from the Bahamas Development Bank, where we look for businesses in the sector to fund, and just as ambassadors or advocates for climate change, are there businesses that you can see that would help that cause and still be profitable? So businesses in the sector that you don't necessarily see present in the Bahamas that still could make money, but still could help the climate change wave.
Yeah, I can take this question or start us off. That's actually something that we've been working on. That's something that we want to advocate for, and that we've been trying to work with different organizations, nonprofit, non-governmental organizations over the past, I want to say like 3 to 4 months, alongside our National Youth Committee for Sustainable Development Goals and Climate Action. We've been looking into different small businesses, small to medium-sized enterprises across the country, not just in Nassau, but in Family Islands as well. And we've been having one-on-one meetings with them to understand how their business is sustainable, how we can assist them, how they can assist others and inspire and educate others as well, and kind of get their businesses as a sustainability framework and integrate that same sustainable concepts that have been successfully implemented in their organizations into other organizations as well. So we do have the SDG booklet, which is not officially launched, but we did have the QR code yesterday, which is something I can share with you as well. And we can get you in contact with those businesses. And we have a short list for other businesses as well, because we want to continue that process. We have 5 in that SDG booklet that are promoted, that we have their contact information, their interviews, everything done. But we do have a short list for other organizations that we want to be in contact with and help them and support them in any way that we can. So I can send that list over to you as well. And hopefully we can get more outreach there for more climate action and sustainability implementation.
I'll start with myself. For that one thing that we can do to secure the future, whether at home, globally, regionally, I would just say continue to be teachers and students. That's what I do when I enter any space, enter any room. I try to always be a student. I try to always learn from the persons around me. I try to always connect. And I think that once we continue to be not just teachers, but also students, we will continue to connect and build that bridge that we need for connectivity in teaching our generation and the generations behind us and before us in climate change and climate action. It's a super tough topic. Like I say, even for me sometimes, I learn something new almost every day about climate change and sustainability. But like I said, I always try to be a student in the room. And when I enter spaces where I'm a teacher, like today, I'm still open to what everyone is saying around me and what everyone is doing. So that's one thing I think that we can do towards supporting climate action in the future. Yeah.
I think one thing that all of us can adopt today is to be unapologetic in that pursuit for change. I think sometimes as young people, when people hear the word young and youth, they sometimes want to disqualify us. They sometimes force us to, work twice as hard for half as much or nothing at all. And, sometimes you may look at leadership and look at advocacy and think it's glamorous, but really and truly, it's a very difficult part that you will take, because sometimes, for example, most of us here, when we started off and we got titles and positions to start traveling, we went from an individual to a country. Nobody's calling me Luke anymore. I'm the boy from Trinidad and Tobago. And that is the way that you will have to be as a youth, as a young person, as a youth leader. Also, interestingly, there are the people out there who would want to, bring you down. There are people who would like to give you criticism. So as a young person, you need to know how to separate constructive criticism from destructive criticism. Because whether you like it or not, there are people out there who may not like what you are doing, and they are going to try everything in their power to ensure that you either tap out or you just say goodbye to everything you are doing. Lastly, I want everyone to leave here today knowing that there is space for all of us to thrive and survive. I know a few weeks ago, Amber and I were speaking about people who like to gatekeep opportunities from one another, and those are some of the realities you face. But there is room for all of us to, be successful, to make a change and make a difference. For those of you who would like to get involved in climate change and health, the CARICOM Secretariat, what we usually do yearly is that we bring young people in to travel to Guyana and we educate them about climate change and health. You don't have to be a youth leader, you don't have to be an ambassador, all you have to be is young and willing to make a change in your community. So that's all I want to leave with you all today. Be unapologetic, be fearless, be ruthless, and be willing to stand on that hill and die on that hill.
For me, the biggest thing would be to integrate sustainability into our educational systems. We want to maximize our outreach, and if we only have 20 people that know about SDGs, say one of them does something about it. But if we have 2,000 people, that's going to be at least 20 people, We want to maximize our outreach and get as many people talking about it, and from a young age. Even if we only mention or dedicate a month in it to sustainability out of our school year, if you get that every single year from when you're like 4 years old all the way to when you graduate at 18, it's almost going to become a mantra inside of your head. It's just repetition, telling people about sustainability. It's almost going to become like brushing your teeth or making your bed or waking up. It's something that's just going to be integrated in your mind. And so getting sustainability talked about from a young age up until when you graduate is a really, really big thing that I think is going to help drive forward sustainable change and climate action.
For me, when the question was asked, the first thing I thought about, maybe I might be biased because I work for an agricultural nonprofit, but my response is more like on a national level. I think that there should be greater investment in food security and climate smart agriculture, because not only is agriculture one of the areas for climate adaptation, but the Bahamas imports about 90% of what it is that we eat. And again, agriculture is directly tied to climate realities, and so if we want to safeguard our economic future, I think that investment in agriculture is something that's going to be important both economically and also with climate considerations. So that's on a national level, but personally I would just say take up space. You don't serve no one by playing small, and so just take up space in whatever room that you are in, and like we said, be unapologetic in it.
To echo the same sentiments of my fellow panelists, take up space and continue to advocate, and make sure that when you're taking up space, you continue to educate yourself in the process. I think it's really important when we enter these rooms that when we standing on business, we also know what we're talking about, Like, you can't stand 10 toes down and they ask you a question and you fumbling because you don't know nothing no more, So just make sure that when you're taking up space and you're advocating, you have knowledge is power. So you have the information and you're ready to defend your cause. And to answer the question, I think it's really important that we continue to give youth the opportunity to learn and to grow and to occupy these spaces at the various levels. I think being a youth ambassador is great, but I also think about those marginalized communities that will probably never see what a negotiation may look like or what a UNFCCC headquarters may look like, but making sure that they at least have access to that opportunity if they want to. So making sure that youth have an open door to explore the educational opportunities and the career opportunities within the climate space.
I guess I'll be closing us out. Waynisha and Samantha really took the words out of my mouth with education, which is one of my main priorities as well. I think I'll build on it to say that I'm very much interested in seeing the Bahamian education system become fit for purpose. I think currently we're still lagging behind in that regard because as we've heard about today, our priority as a country should be focusing on the environmental concerns impacting our nation, that is climate change, and our education system is not tailored to having Bahamian youth come out of school and be equipped and prepared to tackle these problems. It shouldn't be that we're here at like a conference that happens once a year and this is the only access you have to knowing what the SDGs are and what sustainability and climate action is about. And so we do need to improve on that, and we need to improve on it in a way that it includes training and skill building so that you're leaving from your education experience prepared to actually get engaged in the work of climate action. And climate education shouldn't be separate, or education around sustainability shouldn't be separate from the Bahamian education system. It should be wholly integrated, because what is an education system if it's not serving the people and the country and the challenges that are being present in that space at that time? So we need to do more work in there. I think as an encouragement to you, as a final word, the last sentiment I have is to find where you fit in, which doesn't mean fitting in where you find yourself. So find where you as an individual with the inherent skills, talents, abilities, thoughts, ideas that you have fit into this climate action experience, into this addressing this problem. So to take them down to reflect, figure out what it is that you do have to offer, and then find where you fit in. And that may sometimes look like you creating that space and finding other people who fit in that space with you. But do not fit in where you find yourself, which is just going along with whatever the flow is or what someone who you may be interested in or look up to says is the way to go. It's really important to find where you fit in so that we have the multitude of diverse perspectives that we need to effectively address the problem. And that is our time. You've been a lovely audience. I was so glad to have you engaged throughout the entire time. And we are going into our closing ceremony now for day one, but please make sure you're back for the action side. This was the awareness side. We want you all back for the action part tomorrow. Yep, okay. Thank you.